I was crouched behind my husband's mahogany desk when I heard him tell his attorney exactly how he planned to steal every single property I owned before serving me divorce papers. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd been recording everything for the past 20 minutes, had already photographed the incriminating documents spread across his desk, and my own lawyer was waiting for my call. By the time he realized I was 3 steps ahead of his scheme, it would be far too late to save himself. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. Let me take you back to where this all began. My name is Victoria Sterling, and at 36, I had built something extraordinary from absolutely nothing. I own 9 luxury properties scattered across the prestigious Thornfield Hills district, for commercial buildings in downtown Millbrook's financial center, and a boutique resort that had been featured twice in Elite Destinations magazine. My company, Sterling Property Holdings, had become the most sought-after name in Northern California's high-end real estate market. I met Marcus Blackwood at a wine auction 4.5 years ago. He was sophisticated, impeccably dressed, and worked as a senior investment advisor at Meridian Financial Group. He didn't have significant wealth, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who understood money and power. What I mistook for financial acumen was actually a predator studying his next target. We married after a passionate 2-year courtship that felt like something out of a romance novel. I was completely transparent about my assets from day one, even walking him through my entire portfolio during our engagement. I believed in total honesty about finances. I told him over dinner at Le Bernardin. No secrets, no surprises. He'd taken my hand across the table and said those words that now make my stomach turn. Your success is incredibly attractive to me, Victoria. I'd never want to diminish what you've accomplished. Looking back, I can see how meticulously he studied every word I said, every document I shared, every detail about my business operations. He wasn't learning about my success to admire it, he was mapping out exactly how to steal it. The discovery happened on a Tuesday evening in early October. The autumn air in Thornfield Hills carried that crisp bite that made our neighborhood feel like a painting. I'd left my downtown office early, planning to surprise Marcus with tickets to the Metropolitan Opera. He'd mentioned loving Puccini, and La Boheme was opening that weekend. Our home was a stunning Georgian mansion I'd restored personally, transforming it from a foreclosed estate into our dream residence. The irony that I'd literally built the house he was now plotting to steal from me still makes my blood boil to this day. I pulled through our wrought iron gates and immediately noticed Marcus's black BMW in the circular driveway. Strange. He'd texted just 2 hours earlier saying he'd be in client meetings until 9. I grabbed my briefcase and headed inside, calling out his name as I entered our marble foyer. Nothing. I checked our gourmet kitchen, the living room with its cathedral ceilings, even our master suite on the 2nd floor. Complete silence. Then I heard it, the low murmur of hushed voices drifting from Marcus's home office in the converted library wing. The heavy oak door was closed, which was unusual. Marcus always kept it open during normal business calls. Something in my gut clenched with warning. Call it intuition, call it survival instinct, but every fiber of my being knew something was terribly wrong. I slipped off my heels and crept silently up the hardwood stairs, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain they could hear it through the walls. As I approached the office, I could distinguish 2 distinct voices. Marcus's familiar baritone and another man's voice, deeper, more authoritative, with the measured cadence of someone accustomed to legal proceedings. The office door was solid wood, but years of settling had created a small gap along the bottom edge where the foundation had shifted. I'd been meaning to have it repaired. Thank God I hadn't. I knelt down in the hallway, pressing my ear close to that gap, and what I heard next changed everything. The property transfers must be executed within the next 3 weeks, the unfamiliar voice was saying. Once everything is legally in your name, the divorce filing becomes a formality. She'll have no legal ground to challenge what's technically your property. My entire world tilted off its axis. How confident are you about the timeline? That was Marcus, but his voice carried a cold calculation I'd never heard before. This wasn't my loving husband, this was a stranger discussing business. Very confident, the lawyer replied. I've prepared the power of attorney documents using the signature samples you provided. The beauty of this approach is that it appears completely legitimate, spousal property consolidation for tax optimization purposes. By the time she understands what's happened, the transfers will be irreversible and legally binding. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle the gasp threatening to escape. They were discussing stealing my life's work like it was a routine transaction. And the prenuptial agreement? Marcus asked. Actually works in our favor, the lawyer chuckled. Since you signed a prenup protecting her premarital assets, these transfers will appear to be standard marital financial planning rather than asset seizure. No judge will question a husband and wife consolidating properties for estate planning purposes. The prenup I'd insisted on, the very document designed to protect what I'd built before our marriage, was being weaponized as the perfect cover for theft. My hands began to tremble as the full scope of their conspiracy became clear. This wasn't a desperate husband making poor decisions. This was premeditated, calculated theft orchestrated by two men who saw me as nothing more than a target to be exploited. What about the resort property? Marcus continued. That one's worth nearly $4 million alone. Priority target, the lawyer confirmed. The documentation is already prepared. I'll need you in my office Thursday at 2 o'clock sharp to execute the final paperwork. Thursday. 2 days away. I had 48 hours before they began stealing everything I'd spent 15 years building. As I crouched there in my own hallway, listening to my husband plot my financial destruction, something crystallized inside me. The shock was overwhelming, the betrayal devastating, but underneath those emotions, something harder and more useful was forming. Cold, calculating fury. Marcus thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers. He thought he was 10 moves ahead of a trusting, naive wife who would never see it coming. He had no idea that Victoria Sterling had built a multi-million-dollar empire by being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than every competitor in Northern California's cutthroat real estate market. If he wanted to play games with my properties, my assets, my life's work, then fine. I'd play too. But I'd play to win. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. Alright, let's get back to it. I heard the sound of chairs scraping against the hardwood floor. They were finishing their meeting. I had maybe 90 seconds before Marcus opened that door and discovered me crouched in the hallway like some amateur spy in a bad thriller movie. Moving with absolute silence, I slipped back down the stairs, grabbed my heels from the foyer, and walked straight out the front door. I got into my car, started the engine with deliberate normalcy, and drove away from my own home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just drove through the winding roads of Thornfield Hills until I found myself parked at Sunset Ridge Overlook, staring out at the valley lights twinkling below like scattered diamonds. The opera ticket sat mockingly in my passenger seat, a reminder of how completely I'd misread the man I'd married. But as I sat there in the darkness, something shifted inside me. The devastation was real, the betrayal cut deep, but I refused to let those emotions control my next moves. Marcus thought he was orchestrating the perfect theft. What he didn't realize was that Victoria Sterling had built a $12 million empire by outmaneuvering opponents who underestimated her. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note. At the top, I typed, Evidence Collection, Day 1. Below that, I began documenting everything I'd overheard. The lawyer's voice patterns, Marcus's cold tone, the mention of Thursday's 2 p.m. meeting, the specific properties they targeted, every detail I could remember. Then I made the most important phone call of my life. Elena, it's Victoria. I need to see you tonight. Emergency. And Elena. I paused, steadying my voice. Bring copies of all our joint property documents. Every single one. I'll explain when you get here, but this cannot wait until morning. Elena Rodriguez had been my business partner for 5 years and my closest friend even longer. We'd met at a real estate investment conference when we were both hungry newcomers trying to break into Northern California's exclusive property market. She'd built her own empire focusing on commercial developments while I specialized in luxury residential properties. Together, we'd co-invested in 4 premium properties that had become some of our most profitable ventures. I drove to Elena's penthouse in downtown Millbrook's financial district. When I arrived, she took one look at my face and immediately poured 2 glasses of wine without saying a word. "Talk," she said simply, settling onto her Italian leather sofa. I told her everything. The overheard conversation, Marcus's conspiracy with the unknown lawyer, the planned property transfers, the weaponization of my own prenup. As I spoke, Elena's expression shifted from shock to fury to something colder and more dangerous. "That absolute piece of garbage," she said when I finished, her voice quiet in that way that made it somehow more menacing. Elena didn't get loud when she was angry, she got strategic. "How long have you been married?" she asked. 4.5 years this December. "And he's been planning this for how long?" That was the question that had been haunting me during the drive to her apartment. "I don't know. Could be months. Could be years." Elena stood and walked to her home office, returning with her laptop and a leather portfolio. "All right, first priority, we protect our joint properties immediately. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling our corporate attorney. We're restructuring the ownership of those 4 buildings into an irrevocable trust that requires both our signatures for any changes. Won't that tip Marcus off that I'm suspicious?" "No, because I'll position it as my idea for tax optimization. You can even mention it to him casually, like I'm being overly cautious about liability protection. He won't connect it to his scheme because as far as he knows, you're completely clueless." I nodded, grateful for her clarity while my mind was still reeling. "What else?" I asked. "We need to identify this lawyer. The one meeting with Marcus on Thursday at 2 p.m. Elena opened her laptop. "Did you recognize the voice at all?" "No, but he sounded older, experienced. The way he discussed legal loopholes and documentation, this definitely isn't his first time helping someone commit fraud." "Okay, so we're looking for someone unethical enough to help steal from a spouse, but established enough to navigate complex property law." Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Marcus uses Bradford and Associates for his regular business dealings, right? His investment firm?" "Yes, but this felt different. More personal. Like this lawyer was working specifically for Marcus, not for Meridian Financial." Elena pulled up several legal directories on her screen. "Here's what we're doing tomorrow. You're going to follow Marcus to that 2 p.m. meeting." The thought of tailing my own husband like some private investigator made my stomach turn, but she was absolutely right. "I can do that," I said. "Good. Once we have a name and location, we can research this person's background, check for complaints with the state bar, look for patterns of misconduct." Elena pulled out a legal pad. "Now, tonight we need to secure your digital footprint. Do you have all your property documents backed up somewhere Marcus can't access them?" "They're in my office safe and in our shared cloud storage." "Remove them from shared storage immediately. Create a new account he doesn't know about. Also, and this is critical, check your email settings. Make sure there aren't any forwarding rules you didn't create." My blood ran cold. "You think he's been monitoring my emails?" "If he's planning something this elaborate, he's been gathering information for months. That lawyer mentioned signature samples. Marcus got those documents somewhere. Either he's photographed your physical files, or he's been accessing your digital communications." I immediately pulled out my phone and logged into my email account. Elena watched over my shoulder as I navigated to the settings menu. There, buried in the forwarding and filters section, was a rule I'd never created. All emails containing keywords like property, deed, transfer, escrow, or closing were being automatically forwarded to an address I didn't recognize, blackwood.consulting@gmail.com. "Oh my God," I whispered. Elena's jaw tightened. "Screenshot that immediately. That's evidence of unauthorized access to your private communications. Then delete the rule, but keep the screenshot." My hands trembled as I captured the evidence and removed the forwarding rule. "How long has he been reading my emails?" I checked the rule creation date. 11 months ago. 11 months. For nearly a year, Marcus had been intercepting my business communications, reading my private correspondence with clients, attorneys, and partners. The violation felt almost worse than the planned theft. "Victoria," Elena said gently, "we need to assume he knows everything about your business operations for the past 11 months. Every deal, every property evaluation, every financial statement. He's been building a complete map of your assets." I felt physically sick. But beneath the nausea, that cold clarity was sharpening into something sharper and more useful. "Then we use that against him," I said. Elena smiled grimly. "Exactly what I was thinking. If he believes you're completely unaware, he'll continue acting normally. We can use that window to build our own case." We spent the next 4 hours creating a comprehensive strategy. Elena, with her methodical mind, broke it down into clear phases. Phase 1, Evidence Collection. Follow Marcus to Thursday's meeting and identify the lawyer. Document all suspicious communications and activities. Secure all property documents in locations Marcus couldn't access. Check all financial accounts for unusual activity or unauthorized changes. Phase 2, Legal Protection. Consult with a divorce attorney specializing in asset protection and fraud. Place protective holds on all property titles to prevent unauthorized transfers. Restructure vulnerable assets into protected entities. Document Marcus's unauthorized email access and prepare evidence for potential criminal charges. Phase 3, Strategic Response. Determine optimal timing for confrontation. Decide whether to pursue criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized computer access. Plan how to expose his conspiracy while maintaining complete control of the situation. By the time I left Elena's apartment at nearly 2 a.m., I had a detailed action plan and a renewed sense of purpose. The devastation I'd felt earlier had transformed into something harder and infinitely more useful: determination. When I arrived home, Marcus's car was in the driveway. The house lights were on. I sat in my car for several minutes, preparing myself to walk inside and pretend everything was normal. To smile at the man who was plotting to rob me blind. To sleep next to someone who saw me not as a wife, but as a target. I could do this. I'd negotiated with ruthless developers, outmaneuvered predatory investors, and built an empire in an industry designed to crush women. I could certainly manage to fool one treacherous husband for 2 more days. Marcus had made one critical miscalculation. He'd underestimated exactly how dangerous Victoria Sterling could be when protecting what was hers. Marcus was in the kitchen when I entered, making chamomile tea in his favorite ceramic mug, the one I'd bought him from that little pottery shop in Napa during our second anniversary trip. The casual domesticity of the scene made my skin crawl. "Hey, where have you been?" he asked, his voice carrying that warm, concerned tone that had once made me feel cherished. "I got home around 8 and you weren't here." The performance was flawless. If I hadn't heard that cold, calculating voice in his office just hours earlier, I'd never suspect the man standing before me was capable of such elaborate deception. "I stopped by Elena's," I said, keeping my voice light and natural. "She wanted to discuss restructuring our joint properties, something about liability protection and tax optimization. You know how paranoid she gets about asset security." I watched his face carefully for any reaction. Did his smile falter? Did his eyes narrow with suspicion? But Marcus was good, really good. His expression remained perfectly neutral, even supportive. "That sounds smart," he said, pouring hot water into a second mug. "Elena's always been sharp about financial strategy. Want some tea? You look stressed." The irony was staggering. Him offering comfort while secretly plotting to destroy my life. I accepted the tea, studying his face as he handed it to me. How long had he been perfecting this act? How many times had he looked me in the eye and lied? "How was your evening?" I asked, settling onto one of our kitchen bar stools. "Boring conference calls with East Coast clients," he replied smoothly. "Nothing exciting. Actually, I was thinking we should plan something special for this weekend. Maybe drive up to Mendocino? That bed and breakfast you love." Another lie delivered with casual ease. Planning romantic getaways while meeting with lawyers to steal my properties. The cognitive dissonance was breathtaking. That sounds wonderful, I said, matching his warm tone. I'd love that. We sat at our granite kitchen island, sipping tea and discussing weekend plans like a normal couple. He asked about my day, laughed at my story about a difficult client, even massaged my shoulders when I mentioned tension from a long site inspection. Every touch felt like a violation. Every word felt like manipulation. When we finally went to bed, Marcus fell asleep quickly, his breathing deep and even. No guilt disturbing his rest, no conscience troubling his sleep. I lay beside him in the darkness, my mind racing through tomorrow's plan. I'd follow him to that 2 p.m. meeting. I'd identify the lawyer, gather evidence, and begin building a case so airtight that Marcus would never see justice coming until it was far too late. But first, I had work to do while he slept. I slipped out of bed at 3 a.m. and padded silently to my home office. I had several calls to make before Marcus woke up, and I needed absolute privacy for each one. First call, Patricia Chin, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Northern California. I'd never met her personally, but her reputation was legendary. She'd secured record-breaking settlements for her clients and was known for her scorched-earth approach to marital litigation. Chen Law Offices, a crisp voice answered despite the early hour. This is Victoria Sterling. I need an emergency consultation today. It's regarding immediate asset protection in an anticipated divorce involving fraud. There was a pause. Ms. Sterling from Sterling Property Holdings? Yes. Hold please. 30 seconds later, a commanding voice came on the line. Ms. Sterling, this is Patricia Chin. Your property development work has been impressive. What's the situation? I gave her the condensed version. Husband conspiring to steal properties, meeting with lawyer today at 2 p.m., needed immediate legal protection. Have you confronted him? She asked. No. He doesn't know I'm aware. Excellent. Keep it that way. Can you come in at noon? I'll adjust my schedule. I'll be there. Second call, David Kim, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on a complex commercial acquisition 3 years earlier. If Marcus had been planning this theft for months, there would be financial breadcrumbs, small transfers, hidden accounts, suspicious transactions. David, it's Victoria Sterling. I need your expertise on something urgent and sensitive. Victoria, good to hear from you. What do you need? Complete forensic analysis of my business and personal finances for the past 2 years. Every account, every transaction, every property-related payment. I'm looking for evidence of unauthorized access or manipulation. David was quiet for a moment. That's extensive. Should I know what I'm looking for? My husband. I believe he's been systematically preparing to steal my properties through fraud. Jesus. Okay, I'll need authorization to access all your accounts and records. I'll send everything this morning. David, this needs to be done quickly but thoroughly. Time is critical. Understood. I'll start immediately. The third call was the hardest. I dialed my sister Catherine Sterling Walsh, who lived 4 hours north in Sacramento. Catherine was a federal prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime, and while she couldn't represent me personally, her expertise in fraud cases would be invaluable. Vic? Her voice was groggy. I'd woken her. It's almost 4 in the morning. What's wrong? Cat, I'm sorry to call so early, but I need your legal expertise. Not as my sister, but as a prosecutor who understands complex fraud. I heard rustling as she sat up. Tell me everything. I explained it all, the overheard conspiracy, the unauthorized email access, the planned property transfers, the weaponization of my prenup. As I spoke, I could hear her prosecutor brain engaging, her breathing changing as the legal implications became clear. Victoria, this isn't just divorce territory, she said when I finished. This is criminal fraud, identity theft, computer crimes, possibly wire fraud if he's used electronic communications to facilitate the scheme. You need to involve law enforcement. Not yet. I need more evidence first. If I go to the police now with just an overheard conversation, it might not stick. He could destroy evidence, claim I misunderstood, turn it into a he said she said situation. Catherine was silent for a long moment. You're thinking like a prosecutor. Build the case first, make it bulletproof, then bring it to authorities when he can't escape. Exactly. All right. Here's what you need for a solid criminal case: recorded evidence if possible, documented proof of the unauthorized email access, copies of any forged documents or fraudulent paperwork, financial records showing unusual transactions, and ideally, testimony from the lawyer he's conspiring with. That last one seems unlikely. You'd be surprised. If the lawyer realizes the scheme has been exposed, he might cooperate to avoid his own criminal liability. Conspiracy to commit fraud carries serious penalties, especially for an attorney. No lawyer wants to lose their license and face prison time. We talked for another 30 minutes, with Catherine outlining exactly what evidence would be most valuable from a criminal prosecution standpoint. By the time Marcus's alarm was set to go off, I had a comprehensive roadmap for evidence collection and criminal charges. I quietly returned to bed, slipping under the covers just as Marcus began to stir. When he opened his eyes, I was lying peacefully beside him, the picture of an unsuspecting wife starting another ordinary day. Morning, beautiful, he said, stretching. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. Thinking about the Riverside Plaza negotiations. That developer keeps changing the terms. Marcus kissed my forehead with what seemed like genuine affection. You'll handle it. You always do. The casual confidence in his voice. Did he think I was completely helpless? That I wouldn't notice when $12 million worth of property suddenly disappeared from my name? Or did he plan to be long gone before I figured it out? What's your schedule today? I asked, pouring coffee. Meetings all morning, then a client consultation this afternoon around 2. Should be home by 7, though. Want me to pick up dinner? Client consultation. Such a smooth lie. That would be great. Maybe sushi from that place on Harbor Street? Perfect. He left at 8:30, briefcase in hand, probably containing whatever documents the lawyer had requested. The moment his car disappeared down our tree-lined driveway, I sprang into action. First stop, Marcus's home office. I put on thin latex gloves, no fingerprints on anything I shouldn't be touching. His desk was meticulously organized, but Marcus was too smart to leave obvious evidence lying around. I checked every drawer systematically. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of investment magazines, I found a manila folder containing copies of my property deeds. All of them. 9 luxury properties, for commercial buildings, the resort. Each deed was annotated with sticky notes in Marcus's handwriting: priority transfer, complex title, delay, highest value, first target. This was premeditation documented in black and white. I photographed every page with my phone, making sure to capture Marcus's handwritten annotations. But there was more. Behind the deeds, I discovered printed emails, conversations with the mysterious lawyer. The email address was different from the forwarding rule: lawsonlegal.consulting@protonmail.com. I photographed every email in the chain, which went back 14 months. 14 months of planning, strategizing, discussing the optimal methods to legally steal my assets. One email made my blood boil: the key is patience. Allow her to continue building the portfolio while you position yourself as the supportive husband. The more assets she acquires before the transfer, the more profitable this becomes. She's essentially working to fund your future while believing she's building your shared life. Marcus's response: agreed. She's completely focused on expansion right now. Perfect cover for our timeline. They were discussing me like I was a mark in an elaborate con game. A useful fool working to enrich the man who planned to destroy me. After documenting everything in Marcus's office, I had over 300 photographs of evidence. But I needed more. I needed to know exactly who this lawyer was and what they planned to execute today at 2 p.m. At noon, I drove to Patricia Chen's office in Millbrook's legal district. Her suite occupied the top floor of the prestigious Blackstone Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Patricia herself was exactly what I'd expected, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, silver hair styled in a sharp bob, and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "Miss Sterling," she said, gesturing to a leather chair across from her imposing glass desk. "Show me what you have." For the next hour, I walked her through everything: the overheard conversation, the email monitoring, the hidden documents, the 14 months of conspiratorial emails. I showed her every photograph, every screenshot, every piece of evidence I'd collected. Patricia's expression remained neutral throughout, but her fingers drummed once on her desk when I showed her the emails, the only emotion she displayed. "This is excellent," she said finally. "Very thorough. Your husband is going to prison, and you're going to retain every cent of your assets." "Prison? Miss Sterling, this isn't just divorce court material. This is criminal fraud on a massive scale. Identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, computer crimes, potentially forgery if he plans to fake your signature. We're talking about felony charges that carry serious prison time." The reality of it hit me. Marcus wasn't just trying to steal from me, he was committing crimes that would destroy his entire life. "Here's our strategy," Patricia continued. "First, we're filing emergency motions to freeze all your assets. No transfers can occur without court approval. Second, we're documenting everything for criminal referral. Third, and this is crucial, you're going to let him attend that meeting today." "What? Why?" "Because we need him to take one more step toward execution. Right now, we have conspiracy and planning. If he signs documents today, if he takes that final action toward executing the fraud, the criminal case becomes unassailable. No defense attorney can argue he was just considering it or changed his mind." My stomach twisted. "So I just let him do it?" "Not entirely. I'm having my investigator follow him and document everything. We'll photograph him entering the law office, record the time, identify the attorney. Once we know who the lawyer is, we add him to the fraud charges as a co-conspirator." Patricia leaned forward. "Miss Sterling, I know this feels wrong. Every instinct tells you to stop this immediately. But trust me, one more day of patience will result in a criminal prosecution so strong that Marcus will have no choice but to plead guilty. And when he does, you'll have complete control over both the criminal case and the divorce settlement." I took a deep breath. She was right, and I knew it. "One more day," I agreed. "Excellent. Now sign these documents authorizing me to represent you. We're going to let Marcus hang himself, and then we're going to make sure he pays for every single thing he's done." As I left Patricia's office at 1:30 p.m., I had exactly 30 minutes to position myself for surveillance. Patricia's private investigator, Raymond Walsh, would handle the official documentation, but I needed to witness this betrayal with my own eyes. I parked 3 blocks from Marcus's office building, watching through binoculars as he emerged at 1:45 p.m. He looked confident, almost eager, carrying a leather portfolio that undoubtedly contained the documents needed to steal my life's work. Instead of his usual BMW, he got into a silver rental sedan, clearly trying to avoid his regular vehicle being spotted at a lawyer's office. Following at a careful distance, I watched him drive across town to the prestigious Ocean View Legal Complex in Harbor District. He parked in the underground garage and took the elevator to the 15th floor. I quickly checked the building directory on my phone: Lawson and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Suite 1520. Charles Lawson. I finally had a name. I texted the information immediately to Patricia and Raymond, then settled in to wait. 43 minutes later, Marcus emerged looking satisfied and relaxed. Whatever he'd signed, whatever legal framework he'd just put in place, he believed he'd secured his victory. He had no idea that every step had been photographed and documented, and would soon be presented to both criminal prosecutors and divorce court. As I drove home, my phone rang. Patricia's voice carried barely contained excitement. "We have everything." Raymond got photographs of Marcus entering and leaving Lawson's office. We've identified Charles Lawson, 58 years old, practicing for 32 years, and here's the crucial detail. He's been sanctioned 3 times by the state bar for ethics violations. All 3 involved questionable asset transfers in divorce cases. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. So he's done this before. Repeatedly. He's developed what he calls aggressive asset protection services, but what everyone else recognizes as elaborate fraud schemes. The state bar has been building a case to permanently disbar him. Your husband just handed them the evidence they needed. What happens now? I've already contacted the district attorney's office. They're extremely interested in both Marcus and Lawson's conspiracy. This gives them leverage to finally shut down Lawson's practice permanently while prosecuting Marcus for multiple felonies. Patricia paused. The DA wants to move quickly. Tomorrow morning, federal agents will execute search warrants on both Marcus's office at Meridian Financial and Lawson's law practice. They'll seize all documents, computers, communications, everything. Marcus will be arrested by noon. My stomach dropped. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours from now, my husband would be in federal custody. What do I need to do? Nothing tonight except act completely normal. Have dinner with Marcus. Watch television. Go to bed. Let him believe he's gotten away with the perfect crime. Tomorrow morning, when the federal agents arrive at his office, you'll be safely at home while his entire world collapses. That evening, Marcus came home with sushi from Harbor Street as promised, smiling and relaxed. He seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. I suppose it had, the weight of pretending to be a loving husband while planning my destruction. How was your day? He asked, unpacking California rolls and salmon sashimi. Productive. Closed the Riverside Plaza deal finally. The lie came easily. I'd actually spent the day documenting his crimes and preparing for his arrest. That's fantastic. I knew you'd make it work. His enthusiasm seemed genuine, which made it even more disturbing. How could he celebrate my business success while plotting to steal everything I'd built? We ate dinner together like a normal couple. He told me about his client consultation, another layer of deception delivered with practiced ease. I asked follow-up questions, playing the interested wife while internally cataloging every lie. After dinner, we watched a movie on our oversized living room television. Marcus chose a romantic comedy, something light and entertaining. He even made popcorn, his arm around my shoulders as we settled into our leather sectional. The domesticity felt surreal. Tomorrow, federal agents would be arresting him for conspiracy to commit fraud. Tonight, we were sharing popcorn and laughing at romantic misunderstandings on screen. I love evenings like this, Marcus said during a quiet moment, his fingers stroking my hair. Just us, no distractions, no stress. The irony was staggering. No stress for him, perhaps, because he believed his elaborate theft was proceeding perfectly. For me, every touch felt like a violation, every word like manipulation. Me too, I managed to say, leaning into his embrace while my skin crawled. When we went to bed, Marcus fell asleep quickly, his breathing deep and peaceful. No guilt disturbing his rest, no anxiety about tomorrow's consequences. I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through what would unfold in just a few hours. By this time tomorrow night, Marcus would be in federal custody. Our marriage would be over. My properties would be protected. Justice would finally be served. But lying there in the darkness, I felt an unexpected emotion alongside my anticipation of justice, grief. Not for Marcus, that man had never really existed. But for the marriage I'd thought we had, for the love I'd believed was real, for the future I'd imagined we were building together. All of it had been fiction. An elaborate performance by a con artist who'd seen me as nothing more than a target to be exploited. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, "It's happening now. Federal agents are at Meridian Financial. Stay home until you hear from me." I slipped out of bed and went downstairs to make coffee, my hands remarkably steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. At 6:30, Marcus's alarm went off. He came downstairs dressed in one of his expensive suits, the ones I'd unknowingly paid for, I now realized. Morning, beautiful. You're up early again. Couldn't sleep. The Harbor District project has me thinking. Another lie, but necessary. He kissed my forehead. You worry too much. Everything always works out for you. Everything always works out for me. Did he realize the irony of those words? By tonight, everything would indeed work out for me, just not in the way he expected. What's your schedule today? I asked, pouring him coffee. Busy morning at the office, then lunch with potential investors. Should be an interesting day. Interesting was certainly one word for it. Life-destroying might be more accurate. Marcus left at 8:15, briefcase in hand, humming softly as he walked to his car. He had no idea he was walking into federal agents and the end of his fraudulent existence. The call came at 11:47 a.m. Marcus, his voice tight with panic and confusion. Victoria, something's happening. Federal agents are at my office. They're saying something about a fraud investigation. They've seized my computer, my files. I don't understand what's going on. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. What kind of fraud investigation? Marcus, what are they talking about? I don't know. This is insane. They won't tell me anything except that I need to come to the federal building for questioning. Victoria, I need you to find a lawyer. Criminal defense. The best you can find. What kind of lawyer? Marcus, I don't understand what's happening. Criminal defense. Jesus, Victoria, just find someone. The absolute best. I'll call you as soon as I can. The line went dead. I sat on my sofa, phone still pressed to my ear, and felt a strange emptiness. No satisfaction, no vindication, just hollow numbness. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena, news is breaking. Marcus Blackwood detained in federal fraud investigation. Are you okay? I texted back, home. Can you come over? She arrived 20 minutes later, letting herself in with the spare key I'd given her years earlier. One look at my face and she pulled me into a tight hug. It's really happening, I said into her shoulder. Yes, and you did everything right. Remember that. We spent the next hour on a conference call with Patricia, who updated us on the morning's developments. Federal agents had found extensive evidence in Marcus's office, not just the documents I'd already discovered, but additional materials that painted an even more damning picture. Bank routing information for an offshore account in the Cayman Islands where Marcus had apparently planned to transfer money after liquidating my properties. Email communications with two other attorneys besides Charles Lawson, suggesting Marcus had been shopping for someone willing to help him commit fraud until he found Lawson. Most shocking was a detailed timeline Marcus had created, a step-by-step plan for the theft, including contingency strategies if I discovered certain aspects of the scheme. He thought of everything, Patricia said with grim admiration in her voice. Except for the possibility that you'd overhear him before he could execute. What happens now? I asked. Marcus will be formally arrested this afternoon and arraigned tomorrow morning. The charges will likely include conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted identity theft, wire fraud for using electronic communications to facilitate the scheme, computer crimes for accessing your email without authorization, and possibly additional charges as the investigation develops. Patricia paused. Charles Lawson is being arrested simultaneously. The district attorney wants to send a clear message that this kind of predatory behavior won't be tolerated, especially when it involves licensed professionals. And the divorce? We file immediately after his arraignment tomorrow. While he's dealing with criminal defense attorneys and bail hearings, we'll be moving aggressively on divorce proceedings. Given the circumstances, I expect the judge will grant every request we make, exclusive use of the marital home, protection of all assets, substantial attorney fees paid from Marcus's personal accounts. After Patricia ended the call, Elena made tea while I tried to process everything. The man I'd married, the person I'd shared a bed with for 4.5 years, would be spending tonight in federal custody. How are you really doing? Elena asked. Honestly? I feel numb. I thought I'd feel triumphant or vindicated, but instead I just feel empty. 4.5 years of my life with someone who never existed. How did I miss it so completely? You didn't miss anything. Marcus is a sophisticated con artist who specialized in long-term manipulation. This isn't about you being naive, it's about him being calculating and methodical. My phone rang again. Marcus's mother, Margaret Blackwood. Victoria, what's happening? Marcus called from the federal building saying he's been arrested for fraud. This must be some horrible mistake. I closed my eyes. Here it was, the collateral damage I dreaded. Margaret, I don't have all the details yet. I'm trying to understand what's going on. But surely you know something. You're his wife. The word wife felt like a bitter joke. I'm as confused as you are. I'll call you when I know more. It was a coward's response, deflecting rather than confronting. But I couldn't bring myself to tell Marcus's mother that her son had tried to rob me blind. She'd find out soon enough when the story hit the news. By evening, local media had picked up the story. Investment advisor arrested in elaborate property fraud scheme, read the headline on Channel 7's website. They didn't name me specifically, referring only to the defendant's spouse, a prominent local real estate developer. My phone exploded with calls and texts. Colleagues expressing shock and offering support. Clients asking if this would affect ongoing projects. Even a few reporters requesting comment. I ignored them all except for a text from Catherine, saw the news. You did the right thing. Call me when you're ready. That evening, alone in the house that suddenly felt enormous and empty, I walked through each room as if seeing them for the first time. The living room where Marcus and I had entertained clients and friends. The kitchen where we'd cooked together on lazy Sunday mornings. The bedroom where we'd shared 4.5 years of intimacy built on lies. Every space felt contaminated by deception. I ended up in Marcus's office, the scene of my discovery just 3 days ago. The hidden camera was still recording, though there was nothing left to capture. Tomorrow, I'd need to retrieve it before police came for additional evidence. Sitting at his desk, I opened my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding. I searched for information about Marcus's past, his previous relationships, anything that might illuminate who he really was beneath the charming facade. What I found was deeply disturbing. An archived news article from 6 years ago in a small Oregon newspaper, a civil lawsuit filed by a woman named Jennifer Morrison against Marcus Blackwood for financial fraud in a romantic relationship. The case had been settled out of court with sealed terms. I'd never heard Marcus mention anyone named Jennifer. According to his stories, he'd had casual relationships before me, but nothing serious. I dug deeper, searching social media for Jennifer Morrison. I found her, a veterinarian now living in Portland. On impulse, I sent her a private message. Ms. Morrison, my name is Victoria Sterling. I was married to Marcus Blackwood. He was arrested today for attempting to steal my properties through fraud. I found a reference to your lawsuit against him. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to hear your story. The response came within 30 minutes. A phone call from an Oregon number. Is this Victoria? Yes. Thank you for calling. I saw the news about Marcus's arrest. I can't say I'm surprised. Jennifer's voice carried the weariness of old wounds. What do you want to know? Everything. How you met him, what he did to you, how you survived it. What Jennifer told me over the next hour chilled me to the bone. She'd met Marcus 7 years ago at a charity fundraiser, almost exactly how I'd met him. The same charm, the same attentiveness, the same whirlwind courtship. They'd dated for 3 years and gotten engaged. I owned a successful veterinary practice with 2 locations. Marcus encouraged me to expand, to take on more debt for additional facilities. He volunteered to help manage the business finances since I was focused on the medical side. I already knew where this was going. He systematically drained the business accounts, moved money to offshore accounts I didn't know existed. By the time I discovered what he'd done, over $600,000 was gone. He'd forged my signature on loan documents, created debts in my name to cover his theft. When I confronted him, he disappeared. Just vanished one day while I was performing surgery. It took me 4 years to recover financially. I had to sell one practice location. My credit was destroyed. My heart broke for her. The lawsuit got me some money back, but not nearly enough. His parents paid the settlement to avoid criminal charges, just like they'd apparently done before when Marcus scammed his college roommate's family. His parents knew. They'd been covering for him for years. The settlement came with a non-disclosure agreement, which I'm violating by talking to you. But after seeing what he tried to do to you, I realized I did every woman he might target in the future a disservice by staying silent. We talked for another hour. Jennifer gave me details about Marcus's manipulation techniques, patterns I recognized from my own experience. By the end of the conversation, I understood that Marcus hadn't just planned to steal from me. I was part of a practiced pattern. He was a serial predator who specialized in targeting successful women, gaining their trust, and systematically looting their assets. After we hung up, I immediately called Patricia and shared everything Jennifer had told me. "This changes everything," Patricia said. "Pattern evidence. It means Marcus's defense can't claim this was a momentary lapse in judgment or situational desperation. This is his modus operandi." Jennifer said she'd be willing to testify. Excellent. With her testimony, we can establish Marcus as a habitual predator. It'll impact both the criminal sentencing and give us additional leverage in divorce proceedings. That night, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of everything. Not just Marcus's betrayal, but the realization that our entire relationship had been an elaborate con. Every tender moment, every shared dream, every promise had been performance art by a predator who'd been planning my destruction from the moment we met. I cried for the first time since this nightmare began. Not because I still loved Marcus, that feeling had died the moment I heard him plotting with Charles Lawson. I cried for the loss of 4.5 years, for the violation of trust, for the shattering of my belief that love could be real and lasting. But I also cried with relief. Relief that I'd discovered the truth before he could destroy me. Relief that I'd had the strength and intelligence to fight back strategically. Relief that tomorrow, when he was arraigned and I filed for divorce, I'd be reclaiming complete control of my life. Marcus had tried to steal my properties, my wealth, my future. Instead, he'd accidentally given me something far more valuable, absolute clarity about who I was when everything else was stripped away. And what I discovered was someone worth fighting for. Thursday morning dawned gray and cold, matching the emptiness in my chest. I woke alone for the first time in 4.5 years, and the silence felt both liberating and hollow. Marcus was spending his first night in federal custody, and I was finally safe in my own home. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with calls from reporters, but I ignored them all. At 9:30, Patricia called with an update. Marcus was formally arrested yesterday evening and will be arraigned this morning at 10 a.m. The charges are extensive: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted identity theft, wire fraud, computer crimes, and forgery. Given the pattern evidence from Jennifer Morrison's case, the prosecutor is also adding charges for operating a continuing criminal enterprise. How serious are those charges? Very. We're looking at potential sentences ranging from 8 to 12 years in federal prison. The prosecutor wants to make an example of both Marcus and Charles Lawson. At the arraignment, I sat in the back of the federal courthouse gallery, watching as Marcus was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed behind his back. He looked diminished, smaller than the confident man who'd kissed me goodbye just 2 days earlier. His eyes scanned the courtroom and found mine. For a moment, we locked gazes, and I saw the exact moment he realized I was responsible for his arrest. The shock, then anger, then a dawning comprehension that he'd been outplayed completely. Good. I wanted him to know. The prosecutor outlined the charges methodically. The evidence was overwhelming: the email monitoring, the forged documents, the conspiracy with Charles Lawson, the pattern of similar crimes against Jennifer Morrison. Marcus's attorney, a harried-looking public defender, entered a plea of not guilty, but even he seemed to understand the hopelessness of their position. Bail was set at $1 million. The defendant has demonstrated clear intent to flee, the prosecutor argued. He maintained offshore accounts and had begun liquidating assets in preparation for departure once the theft was complete. Marcus's parents attended the hearing, sitting 3 rows ahead of me. I watched Margaret Blackwood's shoulders shake as her son was led back to custody. Harold sat stone-faced, his hands clenched in his lap. After the arraignment, Patricia and I walked directly to the family court clerk's office to file divorce papers. The petition was comprehensive: dissolution of marriage, exclusive use of the marital home, protection of all assets, attorney fees, and an emergency restraining order preventing Marcus from contacting me except through legal counsel. This will be served to him in jail this afternoon, Patricia said with satisfaction. By the time he posts bail, if he can post bail, he'll discover that locks have been changed, accounts have been frozen, and his access to your life has been completely severed. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Ms. Sterling, how do you feel about your husband's arrest? Did you suspect he was planning to steal your properties? Will you be filing for divorce? Patricia stepped in front of me. Ms. Sterling has no comment at this time. Any questions should be directed to her attorney. We pushed through the crowd to Patricia's car. Once safely inside, I finally exhaled. You did beautifully, Patricia said. Composed, dignified. The media will portray you as the wronged but resilient businesswoman, which is exactly the narrative we want. Over the following weeks, the story dominated local news. Every outlet covered the elaborate fraud scheme, with headlines like "Real Estate Mogul Outsmarts Husband's Theft Plot" and "Investment Advisor's Elaborate Con Exposed by Strategic Wife." I declined every interview request, letting Patricia handle media inquiries with brief statements about my commitment to justice and moving forward with my life and business. 3 weeks after Marcus's arrest, I received a call that changed everything. A woman named Sarah Chen, calling from Seattle. Ms. Sterling, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I saw your story on the news, and I had to contact you. I was engaged to Marcus Blackwood 6 years ago, before Jennifer Morrison. He did the same thing to me. My blood ran cold. Another victim. I owned a small tech consulting firm. Marcus convinced me to make him a partner, said his financial expertise would help us expand internationally. Within 8 months, he'd embezzled over $400,000 and tried to sell the company to a competitor without my knowledge. Did you report him? I tried, but Marcus's parents paid me $75,000 to drop the charges and sign a non-disclosure agreement. I was broke, devastated, and stupid enough to take the money. I've regretted it every single day since. Sarah's story was horrifyingly familiar. The same pattern, the same manipulation techniques, the same financial devastation. She'd lost her business, her savings, and nearly her sanity. When I saw what he tried to do to you, and that you fought back and won, it gave me hope that maybe he'd finally face real consequences for what he is. Over the next month, 2 more women contacted me. All with similar stories. All silenced by non-disclosure agreements funded by the Blackwood family. Marcus had been systematically targeting and destroying successful women for over a decade. I shared every contact with Patricia and the federal prosecutor. The pattern evidence was becoming undeniable. Marcus wasn't just a criminal, he was a serial predator who'd perfected his technique over years of practice. 2 months after his arrest, Marcus's attorney reached out about a plea deal. The evidence was overwhelming, and they wanted to avoid a trial that would expose even more victims and devastate his family further. Marcus pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence of 10 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. He also agreed to pay full restitution to me and the other victims, liquidating his retirement accounts and any remaining assets. The divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. Marcus contested nothing, relinquishing all claims to my properties, agreeing to pay my attorney fees, and accepting a permanent restraining order. The marriage that had taken 4.5 years to build was legally dissolved in less than 6 weeks. 6 months after discovering Marcus's betrayal, I stood in my completely renovated home office, the same room where I'd first overheard his conspiracy. I transformed it from a place of deception into a space of creation, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden I'd expanded, built-in bookshelves holding my architectural collection, and a desk positioned to catch the morning light. The space felt peaceful, purposeful, entirely mine. But the most significant change wasn't to my house, it was to my life's direction. I'd established the sterling foundation for financial justice, dedicated to helping victims of intimate partner financial abuse. Using the restitution money Marcus had been forced to pay, along with proceeds from selling 2 of my commercial properties, the foundation provided legal support, counseling, and emergency funds for women escaping financially abusive relationships. Jennifer Morrison had joined as our first board member, followed by Sarah Chen and the 2 other women who'd contacted me. Together, we were transforming our shared trauma into a force for protecting others. We spent years feeling ashamed and isolated, Jennifer said during our first board meeting. Now we can make sure other women know they're not alone and that fighting back is possible. The foundation started with 3 staff members and a hotline. Within 6 months, we'd helped over 200 women across 5 states. The demand was staggering. Financial abuse was far more common than anyone had realized, hidden in the shadows of what appeared to be normal relationships. 1 year after my divorce, I was invited to speak at the National Women's Business Conference in San Francisco. The topic, Strategic Response to Financial Betrayal, Protecting Assets and Building Justice. When I discovered my husband's plan to steal my properties, I told the audience of 800 businesswomen, I had a choice. I could react emotionally, confront him immediately, burn everything down in righteous fury. Or I could respond strategically, gather evidence, build an unassailable case, protect my assets systematically. I chose strategy, and it saved not just my wealth, but my future. More importantly, it led to justice not just for me, but for the other women he'd victimized over the years. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But here's what I want you to understand. Choosing strategy over immediate emotional response doesn't mean you don't feel the emotions. I was devastated, furious, heartbroken. But I refused to let those feelings dictate my actions until I'd secured my foundation. There's a time for emotional processing, and there's a time for cold, calculated self-protection. Knowing which time you're in can save your life. The speech resonated powerfully. Afterward, dozens of women approached me, not just to offer sympathy, but to share their own stories of business betrayals, partnership fraud, and the strategic thinking that had saved them. I'd expected to feel vulnerable sharing my story so publicly. Instead, I felt connected to a community of survivors who understood that strength sometimes looks like spreadsheets and legal documents rather than confrontation and dramatic gestures. That evening, I had dinner with Elena and her partner, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a trauma therapist who'd become a close friend. We were celebrating Elena's latest acquisition, a historic building she planned to convert into affordable artist studios. I have to say, Rebecca observed over wine, you've transformed completely since this whole nightmare began. Not in a reactive way, but like you found your authentic self underneath all the performance. Her observation was startlingly accurate. The experience of betrayal had burned away illusions I'd carried about relationships, trust, and human nature. What remained felt truer, if harder. I know who I am now, I said slowly. Not who I am in relation to someone else, or who I'm performing being, but actually who I am. It's a strange gift to receive from such a devastating experience. 2 years after the divorce, on what would have been my 7th wedding anniversary, I did something symbolic. I took the engagement ring Marcus had given me, a large diamond I'd never worn since discovering his betrayal, and had it completely redesigned. The stone was reset into a modern pendant surrounded by smaller diamonds representing the people who'd supported me through the crisis: Elena, Patricia, Catherine, the foundation board members, even Jennifer and Sarah. I'm not erasing the past, I explained to the jeweler. I'm transforming it into something that reflects who I've become. The finished piece was stunning and entirely mine. I wore it to the ribbon-cutting ceremony for our foundation's new crisis center, a beautiful renovated Victorian that would provide temporary housing and comprehensive services for women escaping financial abuse. As I cut the ribbon, surrounded by survivors, supporters, and media documenting our work, I thought about how this building, like my life, had been transformed from something abandoned and deteriorating into something beautiful and purposeful. My ex-husband saw women like us as targets to be exploited, I said in my brief remarks. He calculated our value in terms of what could be stolen from us. We've proven that our value lies in what we can build, what we can create, what we can offer to lift up others. The applause was thunderous, but more meaningful were the faces of the women we'd helped, survivors who'd found the courage to fight back, who'd reclaimed their financial independence, who'd transformed their pain into power. That evening, I stood on my back deck watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages about the center's opening, updates from foundation staff, and a photo from Catherine showing my nieces holding up a school project about women who fight back against injustice. Apparently, I was their example alongside Malala Yousafzai and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. 3 years after hiding behind Marcus's desk and overhearing his conspiracy, I could honestly say I was grateful. Not for what he'd done, that was unforgivable. But for who I'd become in response to his betrayal. The woman who discovered that plot had been successful and capable, certainly. But she'd also been performing, accommodating, building an empire partly to prove something rather than purely from passion. The woman I'd become was harder, yes. More suspicious, absolutely. Less likely to trust easily or overlook warning signs, definitely. But I was also more authentically myself than I'd ever been. More connected to my real values, more committed to using my resources to help others rather than just accumulating wealth. Marcus had tried to steal my properties, my security, my life's work. Instead, he'd accidentally given me back myself. And that, I'd finally realized, was worth more than all the millions he'd attempted to take. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, I raised my wine glass in a private toast. Not to revenge, that was small and temporary. Not even to justice, that had already been served. I toasted transformation. I toasted reclamation. I toasted the woman I'd fought to become. I toasted freedom. And tomorrow, I would wake up and continue building the life that was authentically, completely, powerfully mine. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.